changed the way we see the world, literature, and most importantly, ourselves. It taught us to enter the alternate reality and crawl with the creature of the night. It reminds us that we can change the way we view humanity. It is Romanticism.
Romanticism, by definition, is a movement in the arts and literature that originated in the late 18th century, emphasizing inspiration, subjectivity, and the primacy of the individual.
Well, Romanticism is a literary movement that happened in Europe and America. In American literature movement, it happened from the 1820s all the way to the 1860s, and some authors really pushed it beyond that boundaries of the Romantic movement, and it went all the way to 1900s. It's actually one of the most important literary movements in American history up to today.
There are 5 main romantic themes. Theme 1. Intuition is more trustworthy than reasoning. This mainly means your heart tells more of the truth than a fact. What you have to say is more valuable than supporting facts due to the fact that this time period only cared about the individual's soul. Theme 2. The action of expressing deep experience has more valuability than the standard universal principles. This is another way of putting that your thoughts and memories are more significant than previous established facts. Theme 3. The individual itself is the center of life and God is at the center of the individual. This means you are what matters most and God is what should matter most to you. Religion played a big factor within American Romanticism during this time period. Theme 4. Nature is an array of physical symbols, meaning knowledge of the supernatural can be intuited. Nature is what the supernatural used to speak to us. Physical symbols such as the wind, the sun, or the rain is how we perceive their messages. Lastly, theme 5. We should aspire to be the ideal. We should want to be the change what is to what ought to be. This mainly relates to the famous quote, "Be the change you wish to see in the world." If you want the world to change, then change it. This is what most romantics reflected on. Both Romanticisms, American and European, were introduced by German artists, yet neither of them were about romance. Romanticism dwells on man and nature and the celebration of the individual. British Romanticism. The British dwelled more upon the creation of art. It was focused on the release from physical attachments. British Romanticism flourished with poems about nature, literary theories, imagery, Gothism, and romantic irony. Imagination and emotions gained more respect than reasoning and facts. American Romanticism, on the other hand, was filled with salvation, guilt, and expired Puritanism, and the strive for freedom. In American Romanticism, literature was dark and nature was seen as a god. The Americans dwelled more on the subject of creating new genres. They focused on the release from rebellion and war in order to gain freedom and more opportunities.
The Industrial Revolution and the Enlightenment, I feel that Romanticism is a reaction to that. That basically, and hopefully, if you discuss this in class, with the Industrial Revolution, I don't want to say it was dehumanizing, but taking the human being out of the workforce, kind of making more machinery. Ralph Waldo Emerson, who's part of the Transcendental Romanticism movement, he has a quote that says, "Nature hates calculators." And I always laughed at that because it truly, Romanticism is the antithesis of everything that the Industrial Revolution or the age of sort of reason would stand for. It's more about feel what you want to feel. So I kind of, with the European Romanticism, they really were based on sort of history and folklore. The past, they had, their Renaissance. So over in Europe, I think what was different than the American Renaissance is that in the American Renaissance, you kind of had the frontier. You had Americans and that kind of coming over here, getting the land, working the land, part of that American dream, owning the land, and then also there's so much undiscovered land. So even when it was Thoreau kind of went off into the the wilderness and lived for a while. It was the idea of being one with nature. And I think what we had in our Romanticism, maybe a little bit more than in England, is that idea of the nature aspect of it. Sort of transcendentalism was the movement, kind of pairs with it. And I think because our land was sort of the undiscovered, uncivilized, not necessarily uncivilized, but undiscovered territory, you kind of had that idea of going out and communing with nature.
Before Romanticism hit the United States, politics in America at the time were ripe. The 18th century left a heritage of optimism about men's possibilities and perfectibility. The ideal of democracy lingered in the lands of the 13 colonies. Equality during this time period would not be a fitting adjective for America. There were various tendencies regarding how only white males were allowed to live normally with basic civil rights, and black slaves and women were not. These tensions built cried out for creative release. The clash of these realities led writers to take extremes, championing positions, literary movements, individualism, yet also seeking the darker side of the broken society. America was also leading towards the possibility of living as a writer, yet there were many restrictions due to the British laws not allowing writers to be printed or published without permission.
America also during this time period has never been wealthier. The rising need for materialism and the focus on business significantly increased, and the spirit was spawning reform movements all over America. Religion in America was also ready for Romanticism. People such as Emerson were looking for new spiritual roots that weren't traditional. Many Europeans that traveled to America to become Americans brought the idea of Romanticism itself. Many Americans have already lived in America, took the European ideas and created a dark twist to it. The Romantics were in a state of revolt, mostly against the restraints of classicism and formalism. Traditional literary forms began to have less significance than inspiration, enthusiasm, and emotion. It was believed that good literature should have heart, not rules. Many authors also included political and economical themes that were actively living in society within their writing to express their revolts.
People use Romanticism as a way to escape, a run from reality. Over the years, we've seen Romanticism illustrate our finest nightmares, making us look into the eyes of the monster and face death. The view of death, terror, and dark imagination was expressed in a special type of Romanticism called Dark Romanticism. Dark Romanticism, by definition, is a literary subgenre of Romanticism reflecting popular fascination with the erotical, demonic, and grotesque. It holds such importance because not only is it one of the main pillars of Romanticism, but it has also shaped American Romanticism. American Romanticism has embedded Dark Romanticism into its blood. It's made its readers feel a sense of darkness and evilness. Unlike European Romantic literature, which is more adventurous and lighthearted, Dark Romanticism are twisted and dark works of art. These works represent expressive feelings of dejection and woe,
which is really about your relationship with other human beings and your relationship with the supernatural. And what happens when somebody that you really care about, somebody that you really love, die? And once you lose that connection, where did the lost one go? Do they stay behind? Do they follow you? How do you connect back with that lost love? And that really became the Gothic Romantic. And it always happened in a dark, stormy night and in a dark castle in a land far, far away. And that's really an American Gothic Romantic.
The literary products of this period in history reflected the priorities and values of the time, focusing mainly on political and economic themes. Philosophical writings similarly reflected the phenomena and purely physical preoccupations of the age and dealt more so than ever with the individual human experience as well as personal thoughts. Influencers played a drastically critical role in the Romantics. Iconic artists such as Edgar Allan Poe, Nathaniel Hawthorne, William Blake, William Wordsworth, Jane Austen, and numerous more are known for their works during this time. Their job was to spread the idea of Romanticism expressed through all types of art, whether it be music, physical art, or literature. They are the ones who introduced the Romantics in a new light, changing artistry for years to come. They were able to recognize the world for its natural features and under meanings that the normal population was unable to see.
One of the most famous Romantic authors would be Edgar Allan Poe. Poe is a clear product of his time. Along with Poe would be Nathaniel Hawthorne. Nathaniel is known for his works such as The Scarlet Letter and Young Goodman Brown. Poe is mostly known for The Telltale Heart, The Fall of the House of the Usher, and The Raven. Poe's brand of the Romantic was akin to his contemporaries, but most of his work often bordered the Gothic genre. Poe was one of the first writers to have mixed fiction and horror. Poe's work is still talked about to this day, and the man himself is one of the few faces of American Romanticism.
Edgar Allan Poe contributed to the Romantic period by establishing numerous different writing styles. Actually, he's one of the considered the father of the investigation story. Like, he basically was the first one who put detectives into his story.
Poe was one of the great, not only one of the great writers in American history or in all of literature, but one of the most important romantic writers. As we talked about earlier, Romanticism was an understanding and an embrace of the multiplicity of emotions that we're capable of. And one of those emotions that we're capable of but often don't wish to confront is fear or terror. No one wants to go through life being afraid. Yet it's perhaps our most primal emotion.
Romanticism was a dominant movement that was extremely influential in shaping the views of art, literature, and music. After the introduction of Romanticism to the population, usual beliefs were altered. People began to turn towards the answers science was beginning to reveal to the world. However, Romantics believed that there were more truths to be found in the natural world.
Romanticism has changed the world into different shapes. Romanticism in America has introduced creativity, individuality, imagination, and new ideas. Romanticism has also introduced creativity through its trend-setting works of art, which has expressed pure individuality and imagination. An example of this would be The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. It brings real aspects of life, along with dark, twisted creativeness with it. Romanticism has changed the outlook of American literature forever. Without Romanticism, American history would have differed. Everyone would focus on the production of the Industrial Revolution and not stop to look at the eyes of nature. Many would also forget the importance of the individual's mind. Without significant authors like Edgar Allan Poe, American literature would never have been introduced to the mix of horror and fiction. Poe also introduced characters who play detectives within writing. The Romantics helped transform the world into a new golden age through the power of imagination. Romanticism also introduced the idea of the American dream, which some people still hope for in today's society. Without Romanticism, we wouldn't have been able to appreciate the nature surrounding us the same way we do today. One of the famous Romantic poets, William Wordsworth, once wrote in the poem Lines Written a Few Miles Above Tintern Abbey.
For I have learned to look on nature not as in the hour of thoughtless youth, but hearing oftentimes the still, sad music of humanity.
Romanticism was perhaps the most significant movement in American literature. If you were to ask most people today at a Barnes & Noble bookstore why they like to read, if they like to read, much of what they'll tell you is, I read to escape my life, I read for adventure, I read to live imaginatively. Maybe they have lives that don't provide them the kind of intellectual stimulation they would like, and they turn to literature to transport them. People who love to read understand that art is a portal of discovery. It takes you to another place that all of this wonderful stuff that you can see and feel and touch can't. That the world of the imagination is where, for a lot of people, all the action is. That's a romantic ideal. That's Romanticism.
Not only did Romanticism exalt nature, but it also prized childhood. Due to the idea that nature was innocent, it gave children an idea of something that is protecting them from the industrial development and urban expansion. This view placed childhood into a new perspective, the exact same innocent perspective that we view childhood today. Lastly, Romanticism gave us a more in-depth visual of imagination. Yes, Romanticism was dark, but it was filled with creativity. If Romanticism didn't exist, writers today would still write under the same Aristotle rulebook. Romanticism is absolutely everywhere today. You could find it in our music, art, and literature. Next time you walk past street art, it is most likely a romantic idea of how there's creativity everywhere, even on a dirty abandoned wall on the street. This is what this literary movement has taught us, and this is what America will hold in their history forever. This
is
Romanticism.